Hello people, you're welcome to Pro Masterclass. My name is Tola Labi, and in today's session I'll be talking to you about why you shouldn't bother to defend your rates or your price to a client. Why you shouldn't bother to defend your rate or your price to a client. And this is something I've been in the position of doing in the past, and I have to remind myself even now not to do it. And sometimes you have clients that approach you and they tell you, why should I pay this much for a logo? Maybe they've asked for your price and you've told them your price, you sent your rate card, and they say, why should I pay this much for a logo? Or why should I pay this much for a cake? Or why should I pay this much for a shoe? Or for whatever service you're doing. And they put you in a position where you now have to, or you feel like you are obligated to defend the value you are offering. Now, this, as I've said before, that this is the position I found myself in the past, and I've taken that bait of trying to defend my value and why I feel they should spend that much, or why I feel the price that I give them justifies my value. Now, it's not a good position to put yourself in as a business person. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that as a business person, if you have a potential client approach you that puts you in the position where you have to defend your rates, and the person is asking why should I pay this much for whatever it is you're doing, then that is the first signal that that is not your client. That's the first signal you have as a business person that that is not your client. And I will tell you why. And this is something that we really need to pay attention to, especially if you're doing business and or you just started a business, or you've been in business for a long time. Whenever I've done this and defended my value to a client, I realize that 90% of the time, the client is still not convinced. 10% of the time, they're convinced. Some of them are very convinced. Sometimes they are grudgingly convinced. But with even the people that I feel are convinced, it might still end up being a bumpy process where the client is still a bit skeptical about what they are getting for that amount. So they always expect more. And that is the problem of working with a client who is always asking why they have to pay a certain amount to get the service. When you work with a client that is questioning, it's very hard to educate a questioning, skeptical mind. It's very hard. And there's a misconception we have that when we ask why, or when a person asks why, they are willing to learn. That's the impression we have that has been built over time. That the person asking why means this person is open to learning, open to hearing your opinion. Well, that might be true sometimes, but a lot of times when people ask why, it's because they have an opinion of their own already. And when reality doesn't align with their opinion, they come to that place where they now ask why. So I'll give an example. If people say the Nigerian government is not effective, and when they ask the question, why is the Nigerian government not effective? It's because they have the opinion already that the Nigerian government should be effective. So when they ask why, it's coming from them wanting to say, why is this my opinion? Why is it not validated in the reality I'm seeing? So if you have to engage in a conversation with such a person, you now have the immense task of breaking that opinion, neutralizing that opinion, and building a new opinion. And that's why it's very hard to educate somebody that's asking why. Because someone that's asking why already has a strong opinion, a somewhat strong opinion. And because the reality doesn't align with that opinion, they ask why. So when someone is coming to you as a business person and saying, why should I pay this amount for this product or for this service? That person already has an opinion of how much they think they should be paying. So they're giving you that Herculean task of breaking that opinion and building a new one. Now, that's a very big task for any one person to do. And I'll tell you why. Because opinions take a long time to form. And I dare say, even a longer time to break. It takes a long time to build an opinion, but it takes a longer time to even break an opinion and build a new one. And that's why when a client comes to you and is asking why it is you charge the amount you're charging and you try to justify it, a lot of times it could degenerate into an argument. And we all know people don't learn from arguments. As a matter of fact, people become hardened from arguments. So when a person is asking why, already has an opinion, and you're trying to break that opinion, there's a resistance, and they try to argue. And when they try to argue, it further deepens their belief that they shouldn't be paying that amount you're saying. So my advice is, when a client comes to you and says, why should I pay this price for your service? My advice would be to stand on your price. Your response should be to stand on your price. And how do you stand on your price? Is by giving the reply, that's the value we put on our service. That's the value we put on our product. That's the value. So if you say, why should I pay this much? Because that's how much we value our product. That's the value we put on it. And end the conversation there. Because anything beyond that conversation might degenerate into an argument. And that doesn't help either you or the client. So you might ask yourself now, if you're not working with a client that's asking why, what kind of client should you be working with? My answer is, it's hard, as I said, we've established it's hard to educate a questioning, skeptical mind. The kind of mind you are looking for as a business person is a surrendered mind. So the kind of client you are looking for is not the client that is asking why, but the client that asks how. How? There's a big difference between asking why and asking how. Why says, I already have an opinion, so convince me otherwise. How says, you know what? I'm confused, I'm surrendered, I'm willing to learn. So you should be looking out for clients that say, okay, this is how much you're charging. That's pretty expensive for me right now, but how can we get to work together? How can we reach a midline between what I have in my pocket right now and what you're asking for? You'd realize that most of the time, if you have a client that is asking how, it opens you up to be able to sell your value, because this person is now open, they are surrendered. How means, I don't know, teach me. And now with this kind of person, you can sell your value, and most of the time you can shift that person from saying, okay, this is how much I came ready to pay, but right now you've taught me and I'm willing to even stretch myself to pay this, because now I understand. Do you understand? I understand the reason I should be paying this particular amount. So you always want to look for someone that is surrendered to work with. The best clients are the clients that are surrendered, that have tried, and for someone to get to a point of surrender, a lot of times the person coming to your business asking why is on a journey. A lot of times a person that has an effective why journey comes to the place of asking how. That person always comes to the place of asking how. But when the person comes and has not gone through the full journey, and you're trying to get the person from why to how immediately, it degenerates into an argument and there is no sales made. So a lot of times when someone comes asking why, just let them go. They would come full circle and come back to how can we work. A lot of times the experience is normally when they ask why and you're not convinced by you, they go to someone else who does not as good a job that they're not satisfied with, and they go to somebody else and that person disappoints them, then they are surrendered and now come back to you. And I say, you know what, how can we make this work? And that way, you do not have to do a lot of convincing anymore, because the client is surrendered. It's just like when lifesavers or people that are into saving people that are drowning, is always say you don't save somebody who still feels they can save themselves. You save somebody when they are weak and they can't swim anymore, and then they now begin to sink or drown. Then they jump in and save that person because that person is surrendered. That is a client that says, how can you help me survive? How can we get to work together? And you realize that if you look at established brands, people don't walk into a BMW dealership asking the salesperson there, why should I buy a BMW? You don't ask why you buy a BMW at the point of walking into a dealership. You might ask it when you see the ad while you're still at home. You might ask it when you're having conversations with your friend. But at the point when people drive to that dealership, they're asking, how can I buy one? How can we make a sale today? That person that comes into a BMW dealership saying, why should I pay this much for a BMW, is not yet a convinced BMW client. So there is no need working on that person to make a sale. People that walk into BMW already have that why opinion broken. What they're coming is, how can you make what I have in my pocket work for buying a BMW? So I would say, don't work with clients that are still at that stage of asking why, putting you in a position to defend your rate. You should spend more time working with clients that are ready to learn. And how do you identify a client that is ready to learn and work with you and get your value? Is that client that is asking how? How can we work together? How can we make this work? That is how you identify the client you should work with.